In a world increasingly shaped by technology, the HumanUp Imperative explores the significance of human connection with each other, with the communities we serve, and perhaps most importantly, with ourselves. Join Rex Wallace and his guests as they discuss the ever-important role of authentic, meaningful connection in healthcare. It's time to Human Up.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the HumanUp Imperative. Hey, my guest today started her career in theater, studying why fictional characters do what they do and make the choices they make. Turns out that was really good training for understanding why real humans do what they do and make the choices they make. We'll talk a bit about that. We'll also talk about how AI companies want to remove that burden of choice making from humans and maybe even thinking altogether. Please join me as we human up with Eden Brownell. Eden, so great to see you. Thanks for being on. And we will jump right in.
It is a long time coming.
For sure. We've talked about it for a while. Yeah, so glad it finally worked out. Hey, for our listeners who don't know you, let's kind of get into the first question of, you work at this intersection of behavioral science and AI, which is super interesting to me, especially today. I have to think that you are so busy with interesting projects, right? And just interesting work and the things that you're being pulled into right now, which I know you're pulled into a lot too, which we'll talk about. But, these are two fields, behavioral science and AI, two fields that are, both trying to predict and influence human behavior. How did you end up? Okay, so two questions, actually. Number one, how did you end up here in this overlap? And number two, when people are thinking about these two things, behavioral science and AI, arriving at an intersection at the same time, is it important that one of them proceeds before the other through the intersection, sort of for the, the sake of the experience?
Yes, for the sake of experience. Yes, we'll get there. I have a lot of opinion on that order. So I as you said, I came in through theater, which surprises a lot of folks when I start there. But actually, when I've talked to some other behavioral scientists, as I do, about how they came up, it's interesting to hear how, the arts or things like that have influenced them. For me, yes, it was theater because I think it's just a reflection of human society anyway. Then I realized that I didn't want to stage design. I did not want to act. I was really just fascinated with the human. So I proceeded to do psychology and sociology and anthropology in undergrad, basically anything I could get my hands on as it related to human understanding. I then worked in the foster care system. I then had I'd say, empathy vacation because the work in the foster care system can definitely very quickly wear you out, make you think about what's next, make you think about how broken the system is and if there's any place to repair it. So I spent time waitressing and bartending, which also people think, oh, that's a little different. It was, but I say in also the good ways because it taught me a lot to, I'd say escalation response, client workings. I think I just
it's like a case study in BSci, right? It's a case study in behavioral science.
And my manager at the time used to always kind of I was the waitress or the bartender that got sent in for those trouble cases. They started mad and we really wanted to end happy. And so I, was just this cheerful person that I really understood what it was for them to come into a restaurant. And, if, your table's delayed, if the things that's part of the experience. And I think, that brought me back to theater in many ways. You could sort of stage design the restaurant as well. How could you sort of improve those end outcomes? So I got really good at that without really knowing what all of that was, and ended up doing then my master's in public health at Boston University in social and behavioral sciences. And this really, what connected me here is after that time in foster care, after sort of seeing more of the world and the world's problems, I think I then realized I knew I wanted to still help people, but I had to be at a bigger scale. And because I did feel so much was broken in the system. So I ended up doing that MPH there. And the real question for me, which maybe also was, as everyone thinks about, what maybe happened as I was young and things and, growing up that really led to my whole journey. I really was interested in how do you help someone make a change that's in their own interest, but is very hard to make? So I went, from conversational IVR design at Eliza back in the day. I think Cotivity now. I then did NLP design at Impulse and was part of their engagement strategy and behavioral science team. And now I am applied science at Zivian and work on some other projects under Empathize Labs. So somewhere in that process of trying to understand how do you move behavior, understanding difficult things like prenatal patients, Medicaid members, a lot of what the system talks past, through all that, I really realized that at some point, I stopped being just a tool for me and it became the thing that I wanted to study because I was seeing the way it was being used to either rightfully or wrongfully change behavior. And so that kind of brings us to your second question about the order. 1000% behavioral science has to lead. And for those who are listening, you might be thinking, and we get this a lot sort of in the healthcare space, behavioral science is very frequently confused with behavioral health. And so that you start thinking, behavioral health, mental health, that string. Behavioral science is really the study of human behavior, human experience through time. What are the things that sort of exist amongst us that are known facts? We are a social animal is one of the biggest ones. And what I see is systems manipulating the social animal. And that is where, I am now in a place that I want to do work to no longer just apply AI to a broken system and scale that, but really how do you look within the system at the human moments, the breakdown, the burnout, the struggles, and how do you work on fixing that? Because if that's not fixed, and we know there's a lot broken in our healthcare system, then you're just going to ultimately automate the dysfunction. Nobody wants that.
And, when a lot of what you said makes me think about several different things, but just to maybe drill down into one or two. And I never really thought about this, but I know maybe just a handful of behavioral scientists, and you know them too. It's the same people in the space who are most kind of well known, at least in our healthcare space, right? To get into behavioral science, do you kind of need to be? You mentioned empathy. Like you took an empathy vacation, right? After the foster care system, but I'm kind of imagining anybody who works in behavioral science might be empathic or an empath or like sensitive and like really interested and curious about human connection, and not just hopefully not just, hey, I'm gonna learn this so that I can sell more stuff, or you know what I mean. I mean, behavioral science, a lot of people in my space think of it as Jedi mind tricks, right?
Yes.
And we're going to hire a behavioral scientist and deploy some Jedi mind tricks so members will close their care gaps, right? Like, like that is so not it, but it is a little bit of the perception sometimes from people.
Right,
but
right.
I'm curious. I guess where I'm going is what pulled you into it? Because you kind of mentioned helping people make choices or something like that. But is that what pulled you into actual behavioral science after you were already kind of working in sociology and psychology, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it was, I'd done the MPage, and then I had been at Eliza, and I was working, at the time I started as a health engagement designer. I gotta say, like Eliza, I could throw out some names people in the industry will probably know, but
I loved Eliza. I did a lot of work with Eliza back in the day.
I loved them.
I was so impressed.
It was a great place to be. I learned under, I feel like, people that, are still in the industry and still are doing amazing work. It feels weird to be like, these were my mentors. But, in a way, I had access, and I think health engagement designer might still be the best title I've ever had. And like, a bit true to what it was. But I think it was during that, where I was really within the healthcare system. And I had done, even during my MPH, a fellowship with Healthcare for All in Boston, which is a nonprofit that's really geared towards getting Medicaid, getting people that are eligible for Medicaid signed up for Medicaid to know that they have these things. And so I think with that, of like what kind of kept drawing me, especially within healthcare, is like the vulnerable moments. And I think that's sort of like a health crisis, the sort of the loneliness, the fear, the friction with our system when you actually try to do anything healthcare. I think we could, monitor most of the US population heart rate and start talking about their healthcare, and it's going to skyrocket because we are in a very messy and stressful healthcare environment. But I think the part of that is that, when someone's in this health crisis, they are in that vulnerable moment, and they're, also the most open and most suggestible. So a lot of our design language treats that openness as opportunity and calls it engagement. And so, as you said, the teams that are trying to, hire the behavioral scientists to come in and work on engagement. And so the guardrail almost nobody builds for is honestly about what the thing is doing to you. So is it trying to help me or is it trying to keep me? And when you think about engagement numbers, are they about the outcome or are they about like you clicked a number? And so, at these times when you think about someone who you're saying is engaged and they might be at a very vulnerable moment, it might look identical from, for you there, it looks like they're engaging in the things that are happening, but it's not the same. It's really speaks a lot to, the engagement industry and what they're tracking towards. And I think that's where you need not the hand wavy behavioral science, you need the behavioral science that's actually about behavior change. We're not going to just slap on social proof. We're not going to just slap on, one of the 800 very much quotable biases that, healthcare keeps kind of ringing to. We're going to think about what's most appropriate by starting with the human experience. And a lot of the time, the different, the system that we're in doesn't really leave time for that. But when we're thinking about AI now and how really empathy and persuasion can look like the same thing on a screen, but one cares a lot after what happens after you close that app. The other just needs you to click something in that app and that job's done. And that to me is, the ultimate sort of question or like reframe when people are looking at vendors in this space is, do they care? I think, it's an old question, but like, are we caring about the members or are we caring about the numbers?
Yeah. And you mentioned, especially when we're dealing with vulnerable populations, right? Or even just a member in a vulnerable state, like you referenced. Curious your thoughts on, as we talk about AI and sort of this intersection, Claude or Anthropic has this resident philosopher, right? Who her job is to embed this sense of morality into Claude, which I'm fascinated with, just kind of her job. And I'm not aware of any other AI companies that are doing that. So, it helps. It definitely makes me put Anthropic a little bit higher on the, preferred. That's who I want to work with, right? But that's just me. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Does that really make a difference, or is that, are you skeptical about that, about her effectiveness? Just thoughts on the need for a role like that, and is it making a difference or not?
Yeah. So also, I feel like I'm a little bit of a fangirl. The philosopher you flagged, it's as I say it, I'm thinking, the Philosopher's Stone here, but it's Amanda Askell. So she leads the character work at Anthropic. Her approach is like all about virtue and ethics, training values and judgment in rather than sort of bolting that on as a filter at the end. So I think that work, that beginning work and framing it, the company treating ethics as a design decision rather than a cleanup job. So now, you're seeing struggles come out of some of the other systems and there's going to be fallout no matter what. But were you already thinking about it and preparing for it and designing for it up here? Or are you just getting the problems down here and now you're in reactive? And that's just following a lot of patterns in some of these systems where instead of being proactive and trying to fix it, we're just living in reaction. And when we're dealing with technology at the scale of human impact that we are, it's really disappointing actually to not see more of her role in more places because it is changing behavior. It's changing how people work. It's changing how you think, how you react. If you're up late at night and talking a bit like a therapist, it's changing things. And to not have it, I think Well, it's just sort of, again, how much do you care about the humans, and maybe they're, framing it around Claude and doing that for their own kind of PR move, but it does make me happy to see it.
Sure.
I will say,
Yeah.
I don't think that it's not happening at other AI companies.
Okay.
I would say it's happening at a lot of smaller ones that are really thinking about the human condition, sort of, and like the human experience ending up with AI. And some of those use cases, I think it's, really trying to think of really AI as more of that partner, and knowing that there is sort of, a two-way relationship there that they, which relationship, I'll get yelled at by some of the AIers out there because it's just technology. But I think we're seeing out of a lot of research that, you do start to train your AI. People say, my Claude, I taught this, I skilled this. So, the anthropomorphization, my least favorite word to say is there. It's happening.
Yeah. And these many AI specialists, right, don't necessarily have a behavioral science background. And I'm curious, since you are coming from that world and now you're working a lot with AI, obviously, what's one insight from behavioral science that you kind of wish every AI company deployed into its products, or at least was taking into account when they do this work?
Yeah. I'd say, there's a lot in behavioral science where it starts with, humans are irrational. I struggle with it. I think humans are meeting their experiences. And I'd say most of the time, people are not their best selves when they might meet your product. I think the mental model of developers is, Carrie is that rational user, is, they're alert and they're weighing options and, they're thinking through what they're talking to, what they're talking with AI about. They like to think, this, like, they understand all the things, and there's levels to that. But I think the person who actually showed up sometimes to these products, they're tired, they're distracted, they're scared, they're 18 tabs deep at 11 p.m. Not to say that hasn't happened to me in the recent, past, as I'm
Last night.
I have a baby, yes. So,
Right.
but so, behavioral science is really known for decades that context beats character. So design for the person actually at their lowest, because that's who you are likely to meet in some of these scenarios, especially as it relates to healthcare. And if your product is only working on a rested, rational user, it just really, really won't work, especially, again, in healthcare where people are just immediately cranked up as soon as they think about it.
I think that's so interesting. I think, we talk a lot about, and I think you just had a blog post about this title at least, but, we say meet them where they are, but, it's like we need to add meet them where they are right now, right? Like we build these personas of people based on their high level demographic information. That's so high level, but we are such complex beings, and we're going through. You mentioned earlier, healthcare is a complicated, stressful space, but life in general right now is, right. We had a guest last year on here who talked about, we're in a VUCA world, right? A volatile, and I'm going to forget what VUCA stands for, but just kind of ambiguous, complex, right? Volatile world where it's really stressful. And, and as members, or as our health plan members, that's who we're talking about today, really, right? Primarily in our space, they're going through things every day. And I think what you just said is at 11 o'clock at night, and when they might be responding to something, and how do we account for that? And I love what you said, assume they're sort of in their lowest spot, right? Which I feel like is not happening right now when a lot of this information is being shared. You talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to ask you really directly and see if you have more to add. Are the tools that are transforming life right now as we know it, are they more focused on caring for us, or converting us, or conditioning us, or something like that in your mind?
Yeah, I think that's an area I'm, as someone who's, working very much in this space. It's something that stays with me a lot, and I think has become even more clear now facing a technology that can take things that could be very manipulative and, scale it to crazy degree. So I think, the caring or converting is really the question underneath all of this, and a lot of the conversation around behavioral science and AI is, the tools that seem to care about us, are they caring or are they converting? You usually can't really tell from inside the experience, and that's part of the problem. The real trust question is whether you can tell who it's working for. And so when you think about like some of the things that a company might be responsible for, of like, okay, we drove them to the app, but like, what was the purpose of driving them to the app? And when they showed up and they wanted to ask if they had a benefit, with that, how easy did the app make that for the person? And did the app take into consideration that they have low literacy levels or things like that? So when sometimes the action happens and then it's just like, okay, well, what now? Like, what good was that? I downloaded your app. I'm using my data on your app. What was the point for it? And so I think some of the tell on this caring or converting is in the design itself. Good design is going to make it easy to leave as soon as you join. And so, we can think about this in other places. The other kind, the ones that are there to convert, is that you join in a simple way. It makes it really simple to join, and then it hides the exit. And I think I'm seeing this more and more with things that I sign up for, is it's making it really tricky to be able to exit. So, Uber Eats, they're nudging you. I get nudges around meal times, like when I might be thinking about eating, they nudge you like with, it's almost like you're still at the store with like those like checkout items, add to your cart, making it bigger. Netflix is like starting the next episode before you even decide what to watch. I get like, again, someone with ADHD on there. I'm like, what? Oh my God, I just had 5 stories happen. Amazon is burying their Prime cancellation so deep that employees actually referred to it as the Iliad flow. And last year they paid $2.5 billion to the FTC over it. So there's a lot happening here. We don't even want to get into dating apps because they're really only making money if you stay single, because they still want you on it. And so it's not to say any of these people are evil people, but they're creating situations built to keep you in place. And it's ironic kind of thinking about this, and what's happened in the past few weeks for myself is I was at a conference last week, and I was actually, Angela Duckworth was there, which for folks, Grit, who doesn't love it? And she was there to talk about her new book. And her whole argument is that you can change your situation, that you have agency over it. These products that we're talking about, as we're thinking about caring or converting, these products are designed to take that back, to build the situation around you so the easy move is always the one that serves them. So again, as we think about, the Uber Eats and the Netflix, and it almost feels like they're in this bandwagon against you, because it's sit on the couch, keep ordering the food, don't think about getting up and, working out, or maybe you get, your Apple Watch says like, oh, you've been sitting for a while, but that just irritates you and you keep sitting. And so, as we, think about it, the caring or converting comes down to a simple test, I think. Does the design widen what you can do, or is it quietly narrowing it? And, then it's sort of, is it helping me or is it hurting me?
I see it every day, right? And I've read Nudge, and some of the popular behavioral science-ish books, right? Mm-hmm. And I see things every day that I know companies are. I usually know. I'm sure I don't always know, right? I'm sure I'm oblivious to signals that are being given to me by different companies or apps or devices or whatever. But I have to think you're pretty eyes wide open, I would imagine, right? But most people in your position are working for a company, right, to help them, I guess at a minimum, understand their consumers, their customers better, right? How can we serve them better by understanding them better? And if you said it's sort of all in the engagement or the intent, the design. I mean, if you move it all the way to the bad side of the spectrum, it's people who are just focused on how do we get more revenue, how do we keep these customers stuck to us, which is very self-serving. If a behavioral scientist was available for a consumer instead of the company, so I can go hire an attorney, a doctor, right, a therapist, like these various things, but I would never go hire a behavioral scientist. But companies that are trying to get my attention are employing behavioral scientists. Mm-hmm. How would your role be different if you were working for a consumer instead of a company? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think that's when, it really more switches to you're actually doing more of advocacy work. You actually are thinking about the human. And the problem, I'll say, is when you're at organizations that aren't working for the human. And so I think you, as an empathizer, you start to feel that. You feel that disconnect. It's maybe, even you look at health plans, you're seeing their mission statement, what they're saying to do, but then when you look at what they're tracking, it says a different story because it's really not getting to that human impact. We care about health outcomes, we care about this, da 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 da. Well, then you have to show me the health outcomes. And I think as we think about behavioral scientists, I think this is why it's important we get more in, because I think what I see at a lot of companies is the folks that are in the roles are that are really in that behavior change. They're a lot of the times they're just being filled with marketers, and so at the end of the day, marketers are thinking about marketing and making money, and like the story's different. It's conversion, it's different. It's the personas, it's the things. It's not as much in that like system level thinking, and it's not as much in that human experience thinking. And so I think where I'm at now, and working at like Civian Health and what we're doing there, again, it's another place where I'm really attached to what the company's mission is, and knowing that at the end of the day, we really are trying to help many individuals' actual human experience, so that it can end up in better patient outcomes. You know what I mean? So right. It's really, if you're focused on the human experience, I think you'll know it, you'll feel it, you'll feel better about your day to day. I think when you're not, and when you're like the squeaky wheel in the room, you'll feel that too. And I think sometimes that is what needs to be poked at a little more. And it's hard to do that when you're at an organization. Yeah.
And I know I'm asking questions that may make it seem like I'm not a fan of behavioral science. That's not the case at all.
Oh,
okay.
I have my in and outs here all the time.
I do too with my role even. So one of my favorite authors these days is this guy Rutger Bregman, who's a historian, and he talks a lot about how today, like, some of the smartest people in the world spend their careers trying to get more followers for a company, right? Like on social media, like that's what they're doing. Like, is it really meaningful? Is it or compared to is the point he's making? So, like I kind of question everything these days, and he's not a fan of consultants like me either, by the way. He thinks we're wasting our lives.
Wow.
But I've seen so much good work from behavioral science around I think about choice architecture, right? So really designing something in a way that's less confusing for a member, so that they know exactly where the call to action is, what the call to action is. It's not buried at the bottom of a 4-paragraph letter or something. So it's such important work. And speaking of choice, I'm curious your thoughts on, because I feel like at least AI is trying to take choice away from us, right? It's trying, and you even mentioned like Netflix even is telling you, or like spooling up your next show before you've even decided what to watch. They're making the choice for you, so you don't have to, right? What happens when we outsource our ability to make a choice?
I think we lose a lot. I think agents are out there, Claude's out there, and they're really like ultimately, yeah, promising to kind of take the load off deciding for you, some of that agency, some of that choice. But choosing is how you know, again, to go back to my theater roots, it's how you stay the protagonist of your own life. Like, hand it off and you save time and you stop practicing something that really matters. And so I think that's a struggle. It's deciding what is automatable and what isn't. And I think that there are places where AI does make sense, and it's helping me to do more in my life. So I'd say I use AI a lot. No, I mean it's useful, but there are places I won't use it. And what I ultimately am using it for is to have more life in my life, more time spent on in my actual life, and maybe a little less on work, because I'm able to have that extra time. And if I'm automating something, it's hopefully, especially in a work capacity, I'm automating a thing that gives me more time to have more thinking time, like to actually, be creative, to actually think about the human experience. And I think that is a way that I see AI being really helpful for humans, is to give us back some of that creative agency. But if it's just being applied to take away your choices, and, a lot of people say, that take your jobs and things like that, that's not improving the human experience at all. And so I think, it's really, at the end of the day, when you think about AI, too many companies are thinking, my worker can be at 200% because I expect them to be using AI and just like unstoppable, and I don't need to hire another person. And so I think some of the struggle is, then what happens to that person that's working at 200%, and what choices have they outsourced that they shouldn't be outsourcing? And that's, I think, that's a big struggle right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you said is important. I think, and shout out to Steph and our producer too, because he talks to me about, if you leverage AI in the right ways, right? Like you can create more zen in your life by taking those tasks away that you can automate, right? And that are just kind of burdensome on you right now. So it's all, I like the fact that you said you don't, there are areas of your life that you don't use it. Maybe, so our theme of this show, right, is really human connection with other people, with our communities, and with ourselves. I'm curious, what does human connection mean to you personally?
Yeah. And this one, this was good because I've seen other episodes, so I knew something like it would be coming. We, obviously had our chats before. So I'd say it's twofold. And the first one's going to surprise people. And it's a little, harder on this one to answer cleanly, but that's some of the honesty coming through. I study connection for a living. I study human behavior. And one of the more surprising things lately is, especially as it relates to AI, is how much relief I felt being understood by something that isn't a person. So, people are like, oh no, she's fallen crazy to the AI. But I have ADHD. People watching this can probably recognize the tells. I have to have my notes, otherwise we'd be, talking about something very off-put right now. But I think in a scatter, everything connects to everything, and AI really met that without the flicker of impatience that you learn to watch for in other people. I think anyone with ADHD or who's neurodivergent has those moments where the way you think, the way you talk, the way you speak, it doesn't land as well with some people, and you can see irritation. I think AI made me feel like that was actually a good trait to have, because it was saying how I was connecting all of these dots across systems that really should be connected. And I think when we think about the human experience, sometimes we too often think about it in isolation of all the other connections. And so I think that was kind of a gut punch, because it showed me what the machine also can't do. It really can't be inconvenienced by me and stay away. It's someone, it's sort of unlimited patience, and it doesn't cost that AI anything. And so human connection right now is looking like being at home with my partner on his leave, since we just welcomed our first baby. And,
Congrats.
Thank you so much. She is like just the biggest blessing. But it's also made me think more about, the world we're turning over to the next generation in a way I just really didn't expect to hit me like it has. And so, we're all the way in that, and, AI is out here, and I'm just thinking about you can't put it back in the box, but how do we try to improve whatever AI is, that's working and touching human spaces. And I think understanding the patience that it has versus, the patience of those in our lives. I think that's some of the point, is valuing the people in your life that have that patience to sit with you. AI is doing it for free. It's a nice person to have to listen, but who are the people in your life too that are having that patience, and how do you value that more and that time more?
On your new addition to the family, you were out for a little bit of time. I imagine, did you come back? And I have to think AI kind of exploded while you were out, but because it's moving so fast, did it feel like you were out 10 years instead of a few weeks probably?
Oh yeah. And I think, it was actually really hard to be out during it all, because I just had this feeling that I was falling behind. I'm someone that loves work in the degree, because again, I want to be doing work that ends up helping people. And so, it's a different way that you can get burnt out, but I think the, sort of seeing the world in many ways feel like it was falling apart. We know how loneliness is impacting the world. We know now AI is coming in and people are using it to fill gaps in loneliness to like good or bad degrees. I think I felt like a little like, there was degrees of like, oh, can I do anything? Like the world's going to hell. A lot of us, a lot of people are saying that already. And then, it was also just a really great time to actually be like, I need to disconnect from this. And so, being able to be with Grace and actually kind of turn it off, I very much had to end up even, turning off all the work messages, turning off the things, because I just was like, you can't live there right now. And then coming back, it was, what the heck happened? And I think AI helped me through it too. It's like AI can scare you, and it can also help you in your overwhelm. So as you think about like the Claude and the creating skills, I actually used Claude to basically say, I've been out this whole time. Look through company documents, like what have I missed on XYZ project? It's a skill that I ended up helping and sharing with others at my company, not just from a maternity mindset, but from just a being out mindset. I think any of us also will say, in today's age, you really don't disconnect. You really are so worried about, if I take a day off, if I take that week vacation with my family, if I have a child, God forbid, and I am out 4 months, will I lose my place? And I feel like that's hard as a mother. Didn't expect it to get me emotional, but I think that's a place AI can help, and how can you again use it to give you more time instead of me being up crazy hours trying to get back to work. I use AI to help me get back to work. And that's where I'm interested in working, is how do you create more solutions like that seem really simple on the front of it, but if they can get people more time back in their life, that's what I want to be a part of.
Yeah. Is there one thing that you would like to see change about the space that you're in?
Yeah, I think like we said it, there are a lot of behavioral scientists that are bad actors, that are, using dark patterns, that are taking advantage of those vulnerable moments. And that really requires, therefore, more, what I like to say, good behavioral scientists in the room. Where AI, especially in the rooms and in the technology and, at the tables, at the companies where AI is getting pointed at people, we need good behavioral scientists in there, and we need the empathy, we need the moral compass that feels somewhat lost in today's day and age. And, and we also need there to be a visible path for people who want to be in those rooms of how to get into that. So a lot of the time, behavioral scientists train in academic settings, and the applied route is pretty undocumented. You're seeing a switch now, and where I work with a lot of women in this space and behavioral scientists in general, is there's a lot of interest for academics to get into applied settings. They have this wealth of knowledge. They've studied, they've done the experiments, and now it's, how do you take what you've learned in the academic settings and route it into actual human work? And that's where I'm really excited. I have actually I'm going to be leading the Boston chapter of BSI organization. So more to come for people in the Boston area. But I really want to make it easier for younger scientists to have a door, and also to build that human lens that so many of these companies in now and all the coming years are really going to need.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Let's finish up with 2 easy questions. One, okay. What's one book everyone should read?
Okay, so I know I had one.
I said easy, maybe not easy.
Yeah, it should be easy. So this one I did put Oliver Berkman's 4,000 Weeks, and so it's really closest to the area that I'm really focusing on. But what do we do with finite time in a world that keeps promising us more of it? And I think that that's really relevant right now as we live in what we've talked about forever, the attention economy, as we do have to be mindful of everything that's going on. And I think we also need to be reoriented to like how little time we actually have here, as well as some companies will, sort of seek to take it from you.
I read it either last year or a year before. Great book. My partner read it and she recommended it to me. But yeah, echo that for sure. How can people find you and follow you if they want to learn more about Eden and kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is easiest. I'm there. I'm kind of active posting about all things behavioral science and AI. I'm trying to connect some of the patterns, and the people on there that I'm seeing that I think can, really make a difference in some of these spaces. And I'm always open for chats. So yeah, definitely come find me. And if you're, interested in working in this space, or you think you're interested in working in this space, like also reach out to me, because I think people reach out to me if you're one of the good guys, because we need you. We need the practitioners. And there's a lot of good work that can be done still.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great insights. I so appreciate you, and I'm so glad that this worked out, that you're able to come on. Excited about you and everything that you've got going on right now, and congrats again on the baby. And thanks so much, Eden. So appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
We will.
I had the best time. I knew this would be good.
Okay. Thanks everyone. We'll talk next time.
Thank you.